Welcome to the No Half Cakes podcast. My name is Jim Sabelico, and I am honored to have you here with me today. Today's episode is going to be amazing, to be honest. I know that they all are. This one was a deep conversation with my good friend Mark Dolfini. We talked about everything from serving as a Marine to showing up as a husband, as a father, to talking about faith. Truly an inspirational conversation and one of my favorites. So if you would do me and Mark the honor of hanging out and having this conversation with us, I know it would mean a lot. So without further ado, let's hop into it.
3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
I'm excited to have this conversation. So I'd love to kind of start off, if you could, just with a brief introduction about kind of your history and how we got here.
Yeah. Did you get my books, by the way?
I did. I have them
Okay.
here,
Yep.
right next to my desk.
It's all good. I don't expect you to peruse through them or anything.
right
Okay, perfect. I just wanted you to have them so you actually, when you have some time, you can.
Yes,
them
no.
if you like. Yeah.
I have started reading with bookmark included.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
Yes.
Makes like I couldn't start reading because I didn't have a bookmark. Now you have it. You have everything. You have everything you need. Very good. I just want to make sure I could. I threw that over the fence. I just want to make sure you got it. So
Yeah, certainly did.
So what got me to this moment in time? Man, that is a fantastic question. I did a lot of things wrong, and the really cool thing is you can get a lot of things wrong and still do pretty okay. So I think that was probably the biggest thing. Like where I started out. Obviously, I grew up in upstate New York, did horrible in school, and decided that I needed to get a little bit of clarity in my life. And the Marine Corps are professionals at jerking a knot in someone's tail, and I needed that bad. So joined the Marine Corps and did pretty well in the Marine Corps, but I also recognized I needed an education if I was going to go anywhere in this life. So got out, went to Purdue. I'm still here in the Midwest. I love it here, and started building a business. Started in the real estate world, and then kind of went into other aspects and worked in businesses and things like that. So it's I'm not sure how to answer the question because I want to make sure that I'm answering the question that's in alignment with your audience. So that's why I'm not sure what direction to take that in.
Yeah, no, well, I appreciate that. And I think the best direction is just straightforward. And our audience is people. And I know like sometimes people ask me like, hey, how do you cater to your audience directly? And I just speak. And I feel like to me, these conversations and why I love them so much, why I love for them to be really just off the cuff, is that it's two people who've done some stuff, who've made some mistakes, who are just talking about the things they did right, things they did wrong, and just sharing some life together. And I feel like the right people will hear it and take from it what you will, right? It's not you and I sitting here giving specific advice, but it's just sharing some life stories, things that we've done, mistakes we've made, and then people can hear that and relate it to their own lives. And I think that's really the best part of it. So I love how you said like, jumping into the Marines can give you a little bit of that structure. So what is it specifically? Because I've never really asked this question of anybody. What makes them so good at that? Is it just, instilling discipline and kind of giving you some level of like penalty or consequence if you don't get your butt in line? Like, what is it about that process that helps people find that discipline?
You specifically in the Marine Corps?
Yeah, I mean, or anywhere if you have other examples.
I think in the Marines, it's interesting because I get asked that a lot. Like, what is it about the Marine Corps? And they are. It's kind of funny because I've heard people describe them. They're not a military branch. They're a cult. I'm like, yeah, there's some truth to that, I suppose. But the thing is that I think that the Marine Corps does extremely well from the very, very early days is they have such an emphasis on leadership. And if you're going to be an effective person in general, I don't care what aspect of your life. I don't care if you're the leader of an organization, a leader of a corporation, or the leader of a household. There's certain qualities that requires. And I think the Marine Corps does a really good job of not only eliciting that, but also creating that and developing that within others. Because when you're 17 or 18 years old and you're away from home for the very first time on your own, I mean, yeah, it's awful. I mean, it is absolutely awful. But they also say if there are two Marines walking down the road, one of them's in charge, and you're like, oh, okay, you're serious about that, right? And so it's just kind of interesting that their focus on leadership and development of the human being, the development of that Marine. I think they did such a phenomenal job of that, and that stayed very consistent all the way throughout the Marine Corps. So I think from that perspective, I think that's why it was so good for me, because they saw aptitude and ability within me, and they're always looking for that. They're always looking for that leader and that leadership ability. And you're going to get jerks, right? There's jerks everywhere, but the but for the most part, they did such a phenomenal job of just kind of saying, we're going to bury the jerks over here, but we're going to really keep the ones who are really performing over here. And they did a great job of that, at least for me. That's been my experience.
That I love how you kind of give the example of if two people are walking down the street, one of them is in charge.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really heard that expressed that way before, but it does make me wonder. I feel like there's also this level of brotherhood, or whatever you want to call it, where there's no man left behind, and it does make me wonder how that plays into the one person as the leader aspect. I'm thinking almost in relation to in a household, because I know a lot of people struggle with this point where, hey, who is the leader of the household? And I think a lot of men typically lead with this iron fist that says, hey, I have to be the leader of the house. It almost shuts down their partner's voice. And I feel like that's not necessarily the right route, right? So what is it? How do you balance that leadership with moving everyone together kind of in step?
Man, it's such a great question. Right now, I'm working on my 9th book. It's called Leader Boss. And it is specifically directed toward an audience who are small business owners and the ones who struggle being a boss because they're not leaders. So I came up with this phrase called Leader Boss. And many people struggle because, and I work with a lot of small business owners, but many of them struggle because they get these employees, and then maybe they get, somewhere between 9, a couple employees here, 9, 10, 20 employees, whatever, but they struggle because many times they don't know how to balance being caring and having candor. And this is something I learned from reading lots of John Maxwell's books, is balancing that caring and candor. There's lots of bosses that I know who care very deeply for their people, and it's like, I don't know, I'm too nice. I hear that all the time. I'm too nice, and I don't hold people accountable. Well, that's the candor part. And if you have too much candor, now you become a tyrant, and now you rely on all the rules, right? Well, you came in at 8:02, so I'm going to write you up, right? When that over reliance on rules is how you're kind of tipping too far into candor, right? So I think it's an equal balance of both caring and candor, because if you're too nice, you get walked all over. If you're too much candor, you're a tyrant, and people will only do up to, but never more than what their job description is. So when you take that, and I've had a lot of opportunity and a lot of time to reflect on this from my time of learning leadership in the Marine Corps and in my faith and other things, in terms of how I'm looking at this, like, even not to get super biblical, but like Nehemiah, right? In terms of how he had to, he had to gather around and have some credibility with these people. And he's like, who are you? Right? We got to rebuild this wall. And he's like, yeah, I'm your new guy. Like, they're like, no, we're not going to follow you. Right. So it's just kind of interesting when you get into that, but it was just kind of funny that when you look at the different sides of leadership, I think it really boils down to 3 main elements, and it's around trust, it's around vision, and it's around communication. And if you don't have all 3 of those, are there other components? Of course there are. But if you don't have those 3 components around trust, around vision, and around communication, you're not going to be as effective as a leader, and you won't know why. Right? If your people don't trust you, it won't matter how clear your vision is. If people don't trust you, it doesn't matter how great an orator you are. They won't follow you because they don't trust you. So if you don't know how to create trust with people, they're never going to follow you. Or if you don't know how to maintain trust with people, and I believe that trust is a balance, again, of credibility, right, of competence, and of character. So if I'm coming in here and I'm starting to say all these different things, and you're like, well, how competent is this guy? Well, competence takes a little bit of time to develop, right? But competence, if you want to build trust quickly, you demonstrate your competence. But if you want to destroy someone's trust quickly, show them a lack of character. It won't matter what you know. They're going to go, I don't trust that person because he runs around on his wife, or he does things that I don't believe in. So I think it's a really equal, it's an interesting relationship between competence and character. So that's that trust component. The other component is a vision. And that vision piece has got to be a shared vision, right? If I came on this show, Jim, and I started telling you about what your vision should be, right? You're like, dude, who are you? You're a guest here, right? That doesn't align with me. It's when a shared vision comes into play. Like, let's talk about what we're trying to accomplish here. Let's talk about the conversations around shared vision, and people are much more likely to carry a ball that they helped inflate. So when you start talking about that shared vision, and now you're getting people bought in on the process, now you have that shared vision component. So that's the second component, where you've got that trust, you've got that shared vision, and now communication. And it's that ability to really rally the troops and pass along that vision, and pass along and demonstrate that trust in a way that you can communicate effectively. And it's not about the ums or the ahs or not saying that. It's about being able to get to someone's heart. It's about being able to tell a story that transports someone else and says, man, I like that guy. I like that gal. I want what they have. So I really, truly, in my heart, and I have always tested, I see another person or like a video or something that says, this is the main element of leadership, and I'm like, okay, does that fit into the model? Does that challenge the model? And I'm like, no, it kind of fits in one of those three buckets. And I would challenge anybody else to say, hey, trust, vision, or communication. If there's another one, please let me know, because I have sought many different people in leadership, and it fits within one of those three buckets. If you don't have all three, you will not be effective as a leader.
Where does authenticity fall then? Does it fall into one of those three buckets? Because for me, like when you're talking about someone who is maybe too nice or too strict, I think a lot of times the examples that I can think of, those people didn't necessarily know who they were at a true, authentic level. And they use either that niceness or that strictness to kind of mask some of that, because they didn't really know who they were. They're not operating as truly themselves.
Yeah.
They're putting on a bit of a show,
Yeah.
right? So for me, I think that authenticity layer is super important. Do you think it fits in one of those three?
For me, it's trust. That's where that fits in that bucket pretty well, hand in glove. Because if they're not, like, look at the social media world right now. There's so many people who, when they show their authentic self, their true authentic self, they tend to be very polarizing, which I could make an argument that's good or bad. But if you're showing your authentic self, that's what people are dying for. They're just dying for a little authenticity, not the dressed up version of what's going on in their life, but like, take the camera down and pan it around the room, and let's see the real, authentic side of you. Let's show the mess on the floor that my books tipped over and I didn't get a chance to pick them up yet, right? Or the coffee stain that I'm gonna have to clean up here in a minute because I forgot to I forgot to grab a towel before the show here. Like, that's the stuff that people want to know. And I think for me, when because I had such a I don't know, I wasn't sure enough of myself about demonstrating the things that I had done wrong, especially in my business, where I had turned a $6.5 million portfolio into $1.5 million in like 8 months for my next trick. So that was terrible. And when I started sharing that with a real estate audience, people were like, wow, you mean you didn't always get it right? Because that's the story that everybody else was telling. Hey, let me show you how to make $1 zillion with no money and blah, blah, blah. That was the story. But when I started sharing this authentic side of, yeah, not only did I mess it up, I messed it up huge, but I learned a really valuable lesson with that. And when I climbed out on the other side, and by the way, I almost died in that process because I almost worked myself to death. Wait, what? Now I'm leaning in. Now people are really interested in that story. And it's really interesting too, when people they hear about my struggles in my marriage. And back in 2017, when our marriage was a complete and total mess, it was interesting because they had, people were interested in that because, like, oh, you struggled in your marriage. I really want to hear how you got to the other side of that. And it was embarrassing at first. I was like, you know what? I've got to tell my story though. And I think that authenticity really, really matters because it helps develop that level of trust within people because they want to hear the authentic stuff. They don't want to hear the dressed up version.
Yeah. So that makes me think of, and you mentioned faith before, so let's get into that a little bit. John 13:7, you do not know now, but later you'll understand, right? If we're talking about sharing the mess part, and I think this is a bit of a struggle because if you're going to have faith, there is a part of that that says, hey, this thing right now might be a mess, but I know in the future it's going to be used for good. And so how do you really walk that line or kind of juggle that understanding of sharing what is a mess while also maintaining that faith that, yes, this is a mess now, later it'll turn into a message? Like, I think that's a very difficult thing to walk, right? Because if you want to share the mess, you also need to maintain the faith aspect and understanding that at some point later that's going to be used for good. I personally struggle with how do you share that part, without being too optimistic or too positive and saying, hey, I know this might look like a mess, but I know it's going to be used for good. It almost negates the realistic aspect of things being a mess in the moment.
Yeah, I think it's important to be present in the mess and not whitewash it and say, "Oh, it's going to be great." Wonderful book written by Andy Stanley called Visioneering. It was written in 1999 and it's an older book. I would absolutely, if any person who is raising children, any person in any sort of leadership capacity should read this book. And I think that because again, part of where I come from, I've been teaching about creating a personal vision for a really long time, but that he does a great job of connecting the personal vision to one that is a God-ordained vision. And one where because again, if we're coming up with our own vision, we may do a lot of worldly, focused visions. And that's not really, I mean, he makes a great argument that it really should be something that is for the glory of God. And I stopped and thought about that. And really, the more I really prayed on that and thought about that, the more I think that is so true, that when you can stay vision focused, like you're the only time that your vision really should evolve is when it's going against your moral code, right? You're going against your ethics. Like, not at all costs you need to go through that vision, but the plans will change, because the plans, it's like you plan, God laughs, right? But the plans are usually just sort of the incubator, the learning. And that's why you say, look, I'm going to create these plans. The plans may work or they may fail. Either way, but the vision is what I'm going to stick with. And that time that you spend, like again in Nehemiah, and he brought this up in the book, that, when Nehemiah found out this horrible state that Israel was in, that the walls were torn down and everyone's just kind of doing their own thing. And he learned about it. He didn't do anything for a while. He prayed about it. Even though you're like, well, he didn't do anything. Yeah, he actually prayed about it. He prayed about it. He planned. He thought, hey, I'm going to be ready. When the opportunity comes, I'm going to be ready. So I think, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I think it's really, for me, it's about making sure that I'm sticking clear to my vision. And as that vision is over time, you stay with that vision and you're praying about it and you're working towards it, and it's always in front of you. It's always right there. It's not like, well, I'm going to write a book someday. That's not a vision. That's a dream at best. But if you're saying, no, I'm really going to write a book, and I don't know what I don't know, but I'm going to write. I don't know who's going to read it. I don't know anything about it, but I'm going to keep doing this, right? And I've been thinking about it. I'm working on it. I'm praying on it. Okay. What do you write? What are you writing? Are you writing every day? Well, no, I'm thinking about taking a course in AI. So maybe, artificial intelligence can write my book. That's not writing, right? That's again, kicking the can down the road. But when you're staying focused in terms of what it is, that vision that you want to do, whether it's writing a book, raising a child, going back to school to get your degree, whatever that is, like that vision constantly being in front of you is going to prevent setbacks from derailing you or other distractions that come along that are going to take you in a direction that you shouldn't be going in. So yeah, I think it really comes back to having that clear vision, having a clear vision written down, and praying about it, working towards it, and never forgetting what it is so you don't get distracted.
Mm-hmm. Where does your faith come from? And I mean that in the sense of, like, in your personal journey, if you don't mind sharing.
No, not at all.
Was it always present, or was there like a defining moment that really kind of solidified it for you?
I've never had these. I mean, I can't say never, but in my life, it wasn't ever like this moment of epiphany. It's always just been kind of like the grains of sand on a scale. And the tipping point didn't like, oh my gosh, like it came to me with a burning cross in the sky. I'd never had any of those moments, and I don't know that particularly would be good for me. It's always been this like, oh, the scale is starting to tip. It's always been that for me. And for me, we grew up in a Anglican Catholic household. So for me, religion was always just a very structured, organized thing, and it wasn't super inspirational, but it was kind of, wasn't super uplifting. It was just very kind of solemn and that sort of thing. Like, you would never wear jeans to church. Like, my mom would not be okay with that. Now I live in the Midwest, and I continued my faith here in an Episcopal church, which was great, an Anglican Catholic church, and it was interesting because it just wasn't feeling super fulfilled, and I didn't really know any different. So my bride, who was raised in a more evangelical type church, she would go to church with me, and she's like, "Well, where are the Bibles?" I'm like, the Bible's up front. Like, what do you mean you don't bring a Bible to church? That's weird, right? Why would you bring a Bible to church? Well, in a more evangelical church, that's very common. And so we would go to this other types of church. I'm thinking, why is everyone carrying a Bible around? It was just very weird for me. So it's interesting as we're going down this path. Well, my bride and I, we were in a very, very bad spot. Like, we were just not honoring the marriage in any sort of meaningful way. She's doing her thing. I'm doing my thing. I'm not proud of that. But at one point in time, like, I wasn't even living at home anymore. And we were about as bad as it gets. I mean, our hands were definitely hovering over the nuclear button. So one day I just decided I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be divorced, but I can't do this. I went home, and she clearly hadn't been sleeping that night. She looked a mess, and I certainly didn't look much better. And I walked in and I said, I don't know what it's going to take, but the only way I'm getting out of this marriage is if I'm effing dead. And I stopped talking. And in that moment, I prayed with her. We had conversation, and I said, I don't know what it's going to look like, but we're going to get through this. And over the next couple of weeks, and of course, she's got every right to feel like, oh, you're showing up now and showing up with God. Like, this is really like, how long is this going to last? And over the next couple of weeks, we sought out some really good counsel from people we weren't taking advice from single people. We weren't taking advice from people who were not Christian. We weren't taking advice from anybody that didn't have a good center in Christ. And we really started having good conversations, and they were helping us along the way. And we knew when to press the eject button so we could cool off for a second. But it was really interesting. During that next couple of weeks, we had some of the ugliest conversations a couple could possibly have. Ugly, but not venomous. That was a huge change for both of us. Ugly, but not venomous. And I think every couple knows exactly what I mean. When you can have ugly conversation, but not venomous. And that was where we were putting it all out there. And at that point in time is when we really started to create a vision for our marriage. What do we want this marriage to look like? What do I need? What do you need? And what do we need from one another? And how do we have conversation? So it started down this journey, this path where we started going to a more evangelical church and showing up, and we're in the Midwest, right? So we go, and someone's got a gun on their hip, and these are farmers. These are good, honest people showing up with their Bibles. There's drums in the back, and we're like, oh my gosh, what is happening here, right? It was such a neat experience. And it was hard for me to hear the music and to sing the music and not want to cry, not to want to get emotional about it. And the really cool part about this story, I know I'm going super long, but I think it's really important to share this, because during that period of time, so we had two boys who I adopted. They were not of my biology, but they're mine. And so Jen and I decided we wanted to have another child. So we went off birth control, and we decided that we were going to try, to have a child of our own biology. And so during that period of time, I was really considering becoming baptized in Christ. Now, I had been baptized, I had been christened as a baby, but from what I understand, people really encourage that it should be your choice. It should be your choice to become baptized. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm really struggling with that. I know the Nicene Creed, like one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. It's not like you just keep redoing it over and over. So I was like, okay, I'm really struggling with this. And during that period of time, I was also reading the Bible from front to back because I'd never read the Bible. So I was wanting to make sure I read it from front to back. And it was like, you're not supposed to read the Bible that way. I'm like, okay, I get that, but just let me get through it so I know that every page has been looked at, right? So I'm reading the whole Bible, and by the end of that year, our whole family decided that we were going to become baptized in Christ. And that particular year was like coming out of COVID. I believe it was 2022. That year, Christmas was on a Saturday, and the worship service was on Sunday. So we all got baptized in Christ that Sunday. And a couple months later, we found out that we were expecting, which is our now 3-year-old little girl. Of course, you kind of angle back and you go, okay, well, when did we get pregnant? And it would have been right after we got baptized in Christ that we got pregnant. And you can call that coincidence if you want, but I don't believe in coincidence. I believe in providence. And for me, that was really when I started to take my faith much, much more seriously. So that's a long story to the journey, but it was,
I love that.
It was great.
That's an amazing story. Have you shared that like that before?
Not that long-winded. So
I love it.
I apologize for it being so long.
Don't apologize. It's a beautiful story, and I think it's really well told. And I mean, so at this point, to look backwards and see just how many grains of sand are on that scale, I think is impressive. And Matt, I don't even know where to go from there. It's such a beautiful story, and just a testimony of like what happens, I think, when you surrender. And maybe that's where we'll go from here, because to me, I'd love to know your perspective on what it means to truly surrender. And I think, you could look at it from two different ways, from like the Marine mentality versus like the faith mentality. And I think trying to define what it means to truly surrender yourself. And is that a word that's filled with strength and courage and honor, or is it a weak word? Because I feel like a lot of men specifically, and I'm sure this is a struggle for everyone, but speaking as ourselves here, a lot of men struggle with the idea of surrendering because it makes you feel like less than. It makes you feel weak and insignificant. Yeah. So I would just love your perspective to kind of move on from there to talk about what it means to truly surrender.
I'm not gonna lie, man, that I do struggle with that. Even to the point where, like, the Bible has got so many of these dichotomies that exist, right? It's like, and I'm not a biblical scholar by any stretch, so I'm going to mess things up. So I'm going to ask for some grace if I don't get this 100% right. But I believe it was Abraham who was going to sacrifice his only son. Like, dude, I would do a lot of things, kind of like Meatloaf, but I won't do that, right? Like, I would do anything for love. I love my God, but I don't know that I could do that. And because he truly recognized surrender. And it's like, well, what do you know that I don't? Like, how do you have that kind of faith? And I think that when you recognize that it's all for the glory of God, and you kind of, and then of course, on the other side of the recognition, or the reconciliation, you say, well, man, if that sounds kind of arrogant, right? Like, if we're told not to be arrogant, yet I've got this God who's kind of saying, yeah, but it's all for me. But then you realize, but it's because he's God, right? It's because he is all powerful and all knowing. And the greatest gift that we have that he gives us every day is time. I'm still working on that reconciliation, but if you can kind of come to an understanding of that it's all for his glory, then of course, submission makes sense, that surrender makes sense. Because we're not guaranteed to get to the end of this podcast before, we may get called home. So I think I can't say that I've got a great answer for that, but surrender, it is incredibly empowering, because you can say, hey, look, I'm going to do the absolute best that I can. I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to give up, but I'm going to surrender and say, hey, look, this is what I think you want me to go. This is the direction I think you want to go in. And I'm going to look for signs that that's the direction, or signs that, hey, if you're making it tough, is it a sign that I'm heading in the wrong direction? Or is it a sign that, hey, you're doing this to make me better? sometimes the science, I'll be fully honest. I'm not the best student. God's got to be like, oh my gosh, I give you all these signs. Come on, man. Right. I think that's probably why it's the sand on the scale rather than just the big rush of a waterfall. But I think that's the best reconciliation that I can come up with is just, for me, I think surrender is incredibly empowering when you can truly do it. And I will tell you, I have not mastered that yet.
Well, I think, and please by all means correct me if I'm wrong on this, because this is an entirely assumption for me, but I'm sure this is lived experience for you. To me, I would equate it almost to, hey, if your general or superior gives you a mission and says, hey, this is what we're going to go do, and you can understand and see the vision, you're not necessarily calling the shots. You're going out there and executing what you're told. And it's not necessarily about your opinion, but you got to do what's in the best interest of the entire unit, right?
Correct.
And I think much in the same regard here, like it's not about me, right? So ultimately, would I want to sacrifice my son in this moment in time? No, but like it's not a real example. But I'll tell you the truth: if there was a car, if we were on the side of the road taking a walk, and there was a car crashing through the median and was about to hit us, would I shield him and give my life for his? Absolutely. Right. And I think that it's about understanding the mission at hand and what are we here to do? What is our purpose? And to me, that analogy makes sense, but again, you might describe it better.
No, I think you're right though. I think it goes back again to that vision component. That if you understand the vision, if you understand that shared vision of where you're supposed to go, because people will ask me all the time, well, what's your vision? Well, I have visions for different parts of my life. I have a vision for my marriage. I have a vision for the relationship with my children. We now have an adult child, right? We have a 19-year-old, we have a 17-year-old, and we have now a 3-year-old. And, being in my early 50s, I'm thinking like, wow, this is, I'm at like parenting 501 right now. Ask me anything, right? I pretty much, we're going through it, but I have a vision for I even have a vision for my business, right? Like I like working with Christian married couples who have kids at home who are struggling in their business. And I have never felt more sure that all of the things that I went through in the previous 2 decades was to set me up to help these people right now, because there's no other explanation. People come to me and I look at it through, like for example, I look through a business through the 4 core functions of business, lead generation, sales, operations, and accounting. And I created this whole methodology called the Viper method, vision, infrastructure, process, execution, reporting. So as I'm looking at it from a strategist, now I can give them a framework that makes total sense. And they go, holy crap, that makes total sense. I'm like, yeah. And I learned that piece back when I messed that up. And I learned that piece when I messed that up. And that mistake and this mistake. So it's all so incredibly clear for me right now that I'm able to write and articulate that in a very clear way, communication, because my vision is so incredibly clear. And now because I can get people's trust because I know what I'm talking about, and my character is like I'm living this marriage and living this life that is authentic, right? Like I'm looking at all these tools and all these experiences that God has put me in. I'm thinking, and this very moment where we're at right now, talking, you and me, is where I'm supposed to be in this very moment. I've never felt more convicted in my life that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, because there are so many marriages out there struggling and so many marriages out there failing because they're focusing on the wrong thing. How many married business couples go on a date night and it turns into a board meeting? Ask me how I know, right? Like it just happens. And it's not like it's intentional, but phone rings and it's this customer and now they get talking and did you do the thing? And now they're logging into something to fix blah, blah, blah. Like, again, I get it. But if I can help them on that other side, where instead of running at 105% capacity, they can run at 93% capacity and have a little bandwidth left over, that bandwidth is the space where love can exist. Because the opposite of love isn't hate. Hate doesn't destroy love. Hurry destroys love more than hate ever could. And that's the problem, is right now we're in a crisis of hurry, and it's only getting worse. that if I can give someone some bandwidth, and rather, because they've got a clear vision of what they want their marriage and their relationships and everything else to look like, that when they get to 90%, they're from 105 down to 90%, and they've got 10% bandwidth, guess what? They're not going to fill it in with nonsense. They're not going to fill it in with scrolling TikTok videos. They're not going to fill it in with doing more work, because they recognize they've got better work to do. They've got a wall to rebuild, Nehemiah.
I love that. That was very well said. Thank you. I think we should end it there, to be honest. I don't know that there's a better way to recap this conversation.
Well, thank you.
In all seriousness, it is really that simple. I think, like you just laid it out, when you understand what's important, who you are, your core values, how you operate, you show up differently. And all of that comes from putting yourself out there, right? And trying things, failing at things, getting feedback, learning, and continuing to operate as God designed you to be. And I feel like when you do that, it allows you to really show up differently in the world. And when two people do that in a relationship, magic happens. I think importantly, one person needs to at least start that, because it allows the other person to feel loved, appreciated, seen, and heard in that relationship. Because look, the unfortunate part is not all of us are going to have that same experience in that same order. And even though you and I might show up in a conversation and be able to have the conversation like this because we've been through some stuff and spent some time, understanding it, you're going to come across people in your life that could be your spouse, could be your business partner, who have not had that yet. Right? And I think that's why it's important for us to have that grace to show up in those conversations and allow them to kind of work it out through you or with you. And I love that, the example, even just to go back to what you shared before about where you were at with your marriage, because I was in a very similar spot. Like, we looked at divorce seriously. And I feel like for couples, once you genuinely consider it, and then genuinely take it off of the table as not even an option anymore, right, that's, I think, when you should consider yourself truly married. Because before that, like, when it's an option, when you even consider it, like, it doesn't hit the same. And I may be explaining this poorly, and I'd love your feedback on it, but I feel like when you've considered it and you say, hey, no, like, at no possible option are we going to genuinely do that. We're going to find a way to make it work.
Right.
That's when, like, things elevate to a different level, and it's deeper and it's more genuine, and it feels more secure because God's in the middle of it. And I feel like that's where we need to get to, but it only comes from us showing up as ourselves, and kind of letting other people kind of witness that through us.
Yeah, that's the decision of commitment. And when you commit, and when you truly commit deeply, there is no way this is not going to work. And you commit truly. There's a really interesting thing that happens, is that now you can start to get creative. That's when your creativity kicks in, because you're going to find a way to make this work. And the thing is that I think the thing that I think where people struggle with is that when their core values aren't necessarily in alignment, that's when you have to kind of go back and say, well, what is it about? Like, why, like, let's we want to stay together. We want to make this work. And that was the thing that with Jen and I, we had some fundamental core values that were intrinsic. Like, we shared a set of core values that we knew one another well enough to know, like, our core values hadn't changed. We were just acting, we were being disruptive children. And when we recognize that we're going to deeply commit, then that's when you get creative. And I think that's really, but it's hard. Again, it's kind of that submission thing, when you're submitting and saying, look, we don't have all the answers. I don't even know that I know the right words, but I'm going to find a way to make this work. And we found a way where we can communicate with one another. And interestingly enough, like, for me, and I know, like, my wife and I, we're both like we're very, very passionate people. Sometimes the best communication for us is not talking. Sometimes the best communication for us is actually texting or through Messenger. And the reason for that is because it actually removes that emotional component in the words. So when we say it via text message or so I know, like, if we have, like, kind of And we haven't really had like a blowout. We don't do that anymore, but we'll get to I'm sorry pretty quick, even though it might be through gritted teeth. Like, yep, I'm totally sorry. I'm going to go pray for you. Right. but when we can have the conversation and say, hey, sweetheart, thank you for listening to me today. Here's what I really wanted to say. And she can read it, and then she'll respond back to me. And that works for us. That it may not work for everybody, but it works for us. Because we were committed, we found a creative way where we can communicate our needs and our frustrations and our hurts in a way that's not going to be emotional. And it's not going to be in a way of like, well, I didn't mean that, or I didn't mean this. And now we're defending, and now it's emotional. And now we're not hearing each other. And so again, that's the beauty of commitment, is because it allows that creativity to kick in anything. And that's not just in marriage, that's in business or in raising children or whatever. When you have those high levels of commitment, it really changes things. And one other thing I want to say too is that, this is also, like in the conversation of whether it's children, whether it's a spouse, whether it's employees, it's about conveying those expectations as well. And saying, hey, look, we have to have a tough conversation right now, Jim, but I want to let you know I'm going to have this tough conversation with you because I have high expectations of you, and I believe you can reach them. Let's talk about that uncomfortable conversation now, right? Like that's a thing that really is not only caring, but also brings a lot of candor, and you can do that in a very authentic way, and it doesn't need to be emotional.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like as you have those conversations, especially the more that you know yourself, the easier it is to have those conversations. It's never truly easy, but it's easier to go up because you're not worried about the rejection, or you're not worried about the criticism because you know who you are. And you're not worried about, when we have this conversation, will you judge me differently? I don't care. I know who I am. All right. And if you have a different experience of me in this moment, and you're going to hinge your entire judgment of me on that, cool. Doesn't matter to me. And I think the more you know your creator, the easier it is to create. And to me, I love that in just no matter what you do, whether that's art and crafts for fun, whether that's in business, whether that's in your family. Yeah, I think the more that you understand who you are, why you're here, and continue to pursue that, the easier it is to start showing up in a much brighter way. And man, this has been an amazing conversation. So I want to thank you for continuing to live that out loud and being willing to be here and share what you shared. And how can we support you from here?
I am I'm humbled, and I really appreciate your taking the time with me today. One quick thing there, I just want to put a bow on that is you can really get you can go very far in this world if you're willing to set aside your fear of ridicule. And that comes back to, again, you're having that authentic relationship with our creator God. And I love that. I love what you just said about that. So yeah, agreed. I am humbled that we got a chance to talk today. And if anybody would ever want to reach out, I'm on social media. I'm actually not hard to find. So, Facebook's probably easiest, but, to reach out anyway, I'd love to have a conversation, especially if you feel like you're struggling in marriage. I am not a therapist. I'm not a licensed, I'm not anything in marriage except a guy that's figured it out for him. But I will tell you that I've got some tools in my toolbox that worked for us. And I'm certainly happy to share that because for me, I think that truly, if there's so much of the fabric of society that's getting torn, and if I can just help put a stitch or two back into it, because we have healthier relationships with one another, healthier relationships in our marriages and with our children and with the people and members of our church and in society, I think most of us, far more of us, are closer than we think, than the extremes that we see being played out in social media. So thank you for the time today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you. Happy birthday to you.
Cha cha cha.
Happy birthday.